He was a titan of industry, a man whose name was whispered with reverence in boardrooms across the globe. His wife carrying his heir was his most prized possession. But on a cold winter's night, when she was 8 months pregnant and swollen with his child, he looked at her with icy disdain and told her to sleep on the couch. He believed his word was law, his power absolute. He didn't know his greatest asset was not the steel in his skyscrapers or the figures in his ledgers, but the woman whose heart he had just broken. And he was about to learn in the most brutal way possible that hell hath no fury like a brilliant woman scorned. The air in the penthouse was always the same, chilled to a precise 68 degrees Fahrenheit, filtered and faintly scented with a bespoke blend of white tea and cedar that cost more per ounce than most people's groceries. It was the kind of air that never carried the memory of the outside world, a sterile atmosphere for a sterile life. For Genevieve Parker, at 8 months pregnant, it felt like she was suffocating. Her husband, Corbin Shaw, stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, a silhouette of immense power against the glittering tapestry of the city below. His back was to her, a posture she had become intimately familiar with. He wasn't admiring the view. He was commanding it. At 42, Corbin was the CEO and founder of Shaw Consolidated, a sprawling empire of commercial real estate and tech investments. He was sharp, ruthless, and devastatingly handsome in a way that seemed sculpted by ambition itself. His suits were tailored by a man in Naples who only worked for 3 clients. His watch was a Patek Philippe Grandmaster chime, and his heart, Genevieve had come to realize, was a fortress of ice. Their marriage, just under 2 years old, had begun as a whirlwind romance that had graced the covers of society magazines. The Titan and the Teacher, one headline had proclaimed. Genevieve had been an art history teacher at a prestigious private school, passionate and vibrant. Corbin had pursued her with the same single-minded focus he applied to a hostile takeover. He'd showered her with attention, admiration, and the intoxicating promise of a life without limits. She had fallen in love with the man she thought he was, the one who listened intently, who remembered she loved sunflowers, who held her hand like she was the most precious thing in the world. That man had vanished almost the moment the wedding rings were on their fingers. He had not changed. He had simply concluded a successful acquisition. Now her life was a curated collection of beautiful empty things. Luncheons with other wives who spoke only of charity galas and their husbands' latest triumphs. Wardrobes filled with clothes she had no occasion to wear. A home that felt more like a museum than a place to live. And a husband who increasingly saw her as another one of his assets, one that was currently gestating a valuable future commodity, his son and heir. He had already named him Bartholomew after his own grandfather, without a single conversation with her. Tonight, the chill in the air was sharper than usual. The argument had started, as they often did, from something trivial that spiraled into a referendum on their entire relationship. Corbin was meant to attend the final prenatal class with her. It was the one about labor and delivery, the one she had been dreading, the one she desperately wanted him there for. He had cancelled 30 minutes before citing an unavoidable conference call with Tokyo. He had sent his driver, Frank, to take her instead. Frank, a kind man with grandchildren of his own, had been more comforting than her husband had been in months. When she returned, she found Corbin not in a frantic conference call, but in his study calmly sipping a Macallan 25, reviewing architectural blueprints for a new skyscraper in Dubai. The lie was so casual, so blatant, it felt like a slap. You lied to me, she said, her voice trembling slightly. She stood in the doorway of the cavernous, mahogany-panelled room, her hand resting on the tight swell of her belly. Corbin didn't look up from the massive oak desk. I had work to do, Genevieve. The call was rescheduled. It's not important. It was important to me, she insisted, stepping into the room. The baby kicked a hard, insistent thump against her ribs. We were supposed to learn how to bring our child into the world. Together. Do you have any idea how humiliating it was to be the only woman there alone? He finally lifted his gaze. His eyes, the color of slate, held no apology, only impatience. This is your domain, is it not? The nesting, the birthing classes. I am building an empire for him, for Bartholomew. I would think you'd appreciate the scale of my contribution. My work ensures he will never want for anything. Your class ensures he knows how to breathe. Let's not pretend the two are of equal importance. The condescension in his tone stole her breath. My domain. You think raising a child is like managing the housekeeping staff. Corbin, this is our son. He needs a father, not just a benefactor. He has a father, Corbin said, his voice dropping to the low, dangerous tenor he used in the boardroom just before eviscerating an opponent. He has one who is ensuring his legacy. What I don't have is a wife who understands the meaning of the word support. All I have heard from you for months is a litany of complaints. You're tired. You're uncomfortable. You don't like the scent in the air. You need more from me. It's exhausting. Tears welled in Genevieve's eyes, hot and shameful. I need a husband. I need a partner. The woman I was before I met you. She's gone. I gave up my job, my friends, my whole life to be with you, to build this family with you. And you were compensated handsomely for it, he retorted, gesturing vaguely at their opulent surroundings. This penthouse, the black card with no limit, the life of absolute leisure. Do not play the martyr, Genevieve. It's unbecoming. I don't want the penthouse. She finally screamed, the sound raw and foreign in the silent, controlled space. I want my husband back. I want the man who held my hand in the park and told me he loved my passion for 17th century art. I want the man who made me feel seen. Corbin stood up slowly, his 6'3" frame eclipsing the light from the desk lamp. He walked around the desk and stopped in front of her, looking down not at her face, but at her swollen belly. The man you describe was closing a deal, he said, his voice utterly devoid of emotion. And he was successful. This hormonal, weepy creature before me is a distraction I can no longer afford. Your constant emotional demands are affecting my focus. He looked past her towards their master suite at the end of the hall. I have a 7 a.m. meeting with the board. I need a full night's sleep undisturbed. The tossing and turning, the getting up every hour, the ridiculous number of pillows. I can't deal with it tonight. Genevieve stared at him, her heart pounding a sick, slow rhythm. She couldn't believe what he was implying. What are you saying? His eyes finally met hers, and they were the eyes of a stranger. Cold, hard, final. I'm saying, he articulated slowly, as if speaking to a child, that you can sleep on the couch in the living room tonight. I need my sleep. My work is too important. The words hung in the chilled air, more brutal than any physical blow. The couch. He wanted his 8 months pregnant wife, the mother of his unborn child, to sleep on $1,000 designer couch that was built for aesthetics, not comfort, while he enjoyed their custom-made, temperature-regulated mattress in the master suite. It wasn't about his sleep. It was a punishment. It was a clear, unambiguous statement of her value in his world. She was secondary to his comfort and inconvenience to his work. The fight drained out of her, replaced by a profound and terrifying clarity. The tears stopped. Her breathing evened. She looked at the man she had married, the father of her child, and saw him for exactly what he was, a monster cloaked in a bespoke suit. "Fine." She whispered the word, a shard of glass. She turned without another word and walked out of the study. She didn't look back. As she walked down the long, silent hallway, the plush carpet silencing her footsteps, she felt the baby shift inside her, a gentle roll. It was as if he was listening. It was as if he knew. In that moment, a cold, hard resolve began to form in the pit of her stomach, displacing the heartbreak. He wanted her out of his way. He wanted to treat her like a piece of furniture. Fine, she would sleep on the couch, but it would be the most expensive night's sleep of Corbin Shaw's entire life. The couch was a monstrosity of modern design, a sleek, low-profile slab of white leather and chrome. It was beautiful to look at, and hell to lie on. For Genevieve, it was a rack. Every position was wrong. The leather was cold against her skin, the armrest dug into her hip, and there was no support for her aching back or her heavy belly. She had managed to drag a cashmere throw from a nearby armchair, but it offered little comfort against the pervasive chill of the apartment. Sleep was an impossibility. With every tick of the grandfather clock in the foyer, a ridiculously ornate piece Corbin had acquired at an auction, Genevieve's despair began to curdle into a pure, unadulterated rage. It was a cold, quiet fury, the kind that doesn't scream, but meticulously plots. He thought she was a weepy creature. He thought her contribution was breathing exercises. He had dismissed her, erased her, and now exiled her to the living room like a disobedient pet. He had forgotten who she was before she became Mrs. Corbin Shaw. In his arrogance, he had made a colossal miscalculation. Genevieve hadn't just been an art history teacher. That was the palatable, society-friendly version of her story. Before that, fresh out of Brown University, with a dual degree in art history, and more crucially, economics with a focus on forensic accounting, she had worked for 3 years at a boutique risk management firm in downtown Manhattan. Her job had been to dive into the financials of companies on the verge of mergers or acquisitions and find the skeletons. She was a digital bloodhound, trained to sniff out hidden debts, fraudulent reporting, and offshore shell games. She was brilliant at it. She had a mind that saw patterns in numbers the way she saw brushstrokes in a Rembrandt. She had quit because the work was cynical and draining. She wanted a life surrounded by beauty and passion, not deceit and spreadsheets. When she met Corbin, her life as a teacher felt like the perfect, gentler path. He had loved that she was smart, but he never bothered to learn the true depth of her intelligence. He saw her mind as a charming accessory, not a weapon. Lying on that couch, the architect of her own misery sleeping soundly in their bed, Genevieve realized she had to pick up her old tools, not for revenge, she told herself, but for survival, for the survival of her child. What kind of future would her son have with a father who could so easily and cruelly discard his mother Corbin's power? Was absolute, because his wealth was absolute. To get his attention, to make him see her as an equal and not a subordinate, She had to speak to him in the only language he truly understood, money. At 2:15 a.m., she pushed herself up from the couch, her joints protesting. The city lights cast long shadows across the marble floors. The penthouse was silent, a sleeping beast. She padded softly not to her old laptop, but to Corbin's study. This was the heart of his empire, the command center. She knew he kept a state-of-the-art laptop in his desk drawer, a machine synced to everything. He was arrogant about his security, believing his complex passwords and the building's unbreachable firewalls were enough. She sat in his grand leather chair. It still held the faint scent of his cologne and his self-satisfaction. She opened the drawer. There it was, a sleek black machine. She powered it on. The login screen appeared asking for a password. Corbin had told her his passwords were a mix of his first dog's name and a random string of numbers he changed weekly. A lie. Corbin was a creature of habit and ego. His password, she guessed, would be something significant to him, something that reinforced his own sense of greatness. She tried his birthday. Denied. She tried Bartholomew Shaw. Denied. She tried Shaw Consolidated CEO. Denied. She paused, closing her eyes, thinking. What was the most important moment of his life in his eyes? Not their wedding day. Not the day they found out she was pregnant. It was the day he became Corbin Shaw the Titan. The day his first major deal closed, the one that put him on the map. The acquisition of Vantage Properties. He had talked about it incessantly when they first met, the cunning, the risk, the triumph. The deal had closed on October the 27th, 2008. She typed Vantage 2007-2008, access granted. A triumphant, bitter smile touched her lips. She was in. His entire digital life lay open before her. Emails, calendars, personal files. But she ignored those. She was on a mission. She opened his browser. His bookmarks were a roadmap to his financial soul links, to his private banking portals, investment platforms, and the internal servers of Shaw Consolidated. This is where her old skills kicked into high gear. Corbin used multiple banks for his personal and business finances, a large international bank for his primary business accounts, a Swiss bank for his private wealth, and a smaller domestic bank for his liquid assets and payroll. Getting into one would be hard. Getting into all of them would be a nightmare for a novice. But Genevieve wasn't a novice, and she had a key. A few months ago, complaining about the hassle of managing so many accounts, Corbin had set up a financial aggregator service, a high-level dashboard that linked all his accounts for a comprehensive overview. He used it purely for viewing, but she knew these services had deep token-based integrations with the banks. To make changes, he still used the individual bank portals, which required two-factor authentication, usually a code sent to his phone. His phone was on the nightstand beside his bed. Useless. But Corbin, in his hubris, had set up backup authentication methods. Security questions. He thought them foolproof. Who would know the name of his third-grade teacher or the street he grew up on? Genevieve would. In the early intoxicating days of their courtship, when he was still playing the part of a man who shared his life story, he had told her everything. He had painted a picture of his hard Scrabble upbringing, a tale designed to make his current success seem all the more spectacular. She had listened enraptured. Now she summoned those details from her perfect memory. First, the primary business accounts. She navigated to the bank's login page, initiated a password reset, and chose the Answer Security Questions option. name of your first pet Zeus, a mangy mutt he'd spoken of with theatrical fondness. Street you grew up on Elmwood Avenue. He'd called it the wrong side of the tracks. What was your first car? A 1982 Ford Escort. He'd claimed he rebuilt the engine himself. Access. She was in the main portal for Shaw Consolidated. Millions of dollars flowed through these accounts daily. Operating capital investment funds. Payroll for thousands of employees. She didn't withdraw the money. That was crude and illegal. She needed to do something more elegant, more debilitating. She navigated to the account settings. She found the signatory and access controls. Corbin was the primary. The CFO, a man named Gerald, was the secondary. With a few precise clicks, Genevieve changed the access protocols. She added a new layer of security, a mandatory third-party authorization for any transaction over $1,000. She created this third-party entity and assigned the authorization key to a new encrypted email address she had created just minutes before on a secure anonymous server. Then she demoted Corbin and Gerald's access rights from administrator to read-only. They could look at their money, but they couldn't touch a single dime without her permission. Next, the Swiss account, his personal fortune. This was harder. The Swiss were notoriously protective. But Corbin had used the same security questions. She got in. Here she didn't just restrict access. She placed a hold on all assets, citing a potential security breach. She filled out the digital form, flagging suspicious login attempts, her own, and recommending a full account freeze pending a shareholder investigation. The freeze would take 24 to 48 hours to be reviewed by a human agent, but the automated system would lock it down instantly. Finally, the domestic bank. This held his walking around money, a few million in liquid cash. It was linked to his credit cards, including the black card he was so proud of. She used the same method. Reset password answer questions, get in. Here she was, more brutal. She initiated a transfer of the entire balance, routing it not to an external account, but to a new sub-account within the same bank that she labeled pending litigation reserve. She then cancelled all linked credit and debit cards, reporting them as stolen. The entire operation took her less than an hour. She was methodical, precise, and utterly calm. It felt like her old job, only the stakes were infinitely higher. As she worked, she saved key documents to a secure USB drive she found in Corbin's desk. Balance sheets, investment portfolios, and a few interesting-looking folders labeled Project Nightingale and Cayman Ventures. She didn't have time to look at them now, but her instincts told her they were important. At 3:30 a.m., she was done. She cleared the browser history, logged out of everything, and shut down the laptop, placing it back in the drawer exactly as she had found it. She walked out of the study, leaving the scent of her husband's expensive cologne and the ghost of his shattered empire behind her. She returned to the white leather couch. It was still uncomfortable, still cold. But as she settled back onto the cushions, pulling the thin cashmere throw over her, a strange sense of peace washed over her. The battle was won. The storm was coming. When the sun rose, Corbin Shaw would wake up a king. But by the time he had his first cup of coffee, he would be a prisoner in his own castle. And Genevieve, the pregnant woman on the couch, would be the one holding the key. Corbin Shaw woke at 6:00 a.m., as he always did, to the silent automated hum of the blackout shades retracting from the vast windows of the master suite. The early morning light, still a soft grey, crept into the room. He stretched a contented sigh, escaping his lips. He had slept magnificently. The bed an expanse of perfect stillness, without Genevieve's restless, pregnant form, had been a sanctuary. He felt sharp, rested, and ready to conquer the day. He glanced at the empty side of the bed, a flicker of something annoyance, satisfaction, crossing his features. Her little tantrum had been tiresome, but necessary. She needed to understand her place to understand that his needs, the needs of the empire, were paramount. A night on the couch would serve as a poignant reminder. He swung his legs out of bed and padded barefoot across the heated marble floor into his palatial bathroom. By 6:45 a.m., showered, shaved, and dressed in a crisp, dark navy suit, he felt the first inkling that the world was slightly off its axis. He walked into the kitchen, where his personal chef Anton was usually already preparing his standard breakfast: 2 poached eggs, half an avocado, and a shot of wheatgrass juice. Today the kitchen was dark. Anton was nowhere to be seen. A note was on the counter. Mr. Shaw. My apologies, but my weekly direct deposit did not arrive. I have tried to contact payroll, but the lines seem to be down. I cannot work without assurance of payment. I will return once this is resolved. Sincerely, Anton Corbin frowned. A payroll glitch unacceptable. He made a mental note to tear a strip off Gerald, his CFO. He decided to make his own coffee, a task he hadn't performed in years. He went to the state-of-the-art espresso machine, a gleaming silver beast, and pressed the power button. Nothing. He checked the plug. It was in. He flipped the circuit breaker. Still nothing. He stared at it in confusion. The entire appliance panel was dead. He didn't know that Genevieve, in her meticulous sweep, had logged into their smart home system and disabled the power to the kitchen sub-panel. A small, petty, and deeply satisfying act. Annoyed, he abandoned the idea of coffee and walked into the living area. Genevieve was asleep on the white couch, curled into a tight ball. She looked small and pathetic, he thought. Good. Message received. He strode past her to the front door, grabbing his briefcase. His driver, Frank, was usually waiting in the private elevator lobby at 7:00 a.m. sharp. But the elevator lobby was empty. Corbin pulled out his phone to call him, his thumb hovering over the contact. Then he saw a text message from Frank, sent an hour ago. Shaw. My company fuel card was declined at the gas station this morning. The fleet manager says all corporate cards have been suspended. I can't get the car out of the garage. I am very sorry. Corbin stared at the message. First Anton, now Frank. A payroll glitch was one thing, but the suspension of the entire corporate card system. This was a much bigger fire. His annoyance morphed into a cold knot of anger. He dialed Gerald's number. It went straight to voicemail. Gerald, it's Corbin. What the hell is going on with our accounts? The cards are dead, and payroll hasn't gone out. Call me the second you get this. Fix it. He hung up, his jaw tight. Fine. He would take a taxi. He tried to use a ride-sharing app on his phone. He entered the address for the Shaw Consolidated headquarters downtown. He hit confirm. A red banner appeared at the top of the screen. Payment method declined. He stared at it, his mind refusing to process the information. He tried again. Payment method declined. He opened his mobile banking app, the one for his personal walking around money. He logged in. His eyes widened in disbelief. The screen showed his checking account, but the balance was $0, and below it, a new sub-account he didn't recognize, pending litigation reserve, with a balance of just over $3 million. A cold sweat broke out on his brow. This wasn't a glitch. This was an attack. He was being hacked. He immediately called the bank's emergency fraud line. After an agonizing 10 minutes on hold, a placid agent answered. Yes, Mr. Shaw, the agent said calmly after Corbin had frantically explained the situation. We see the activity. The funds were transferred to the reserve account at 3:17 a.m. this morning. The request was initiated from a recognized device and authenticated correctly using your security questions. As per the request, your credit and debit cards were also reported stolen and have been permanently cancelled. New cards are being mailed to your address. I didn't make that request, Corbin roared into the phone, his voice echoing in the silent penthouse. Someone stole my identity. You need to reverse it. Now, sir, I understand your frustration, but all protocols were followed. To reverse this, we'll need you to come into a branch with 2 forms of government-issued ID to verify your identity. Corbin felt a surge of pure rage. Do you know who I am? I am Corbin Shaw. I own half this city. I don't come into a branch. Those are our policies, sir, the agent replied, his tone unmoved. For your protection. He hung up his hand, trembling. This was a nightmare. He immediately tried to log into the main Shaw Consolidated Business portal. He needed to see the damage. He entered his password. Access denied. Your user permissions have been changed. He froze. His permissions. He was the god of this system. He didn't have permissions. He had ownership. He tried again. Denied. Panic, a feeling so foreign to him, it was physically nauseating, began to crawl up his spine. He called Gerald again. This time, his CFO picked up his voice, a frantic squeak. Corbin. Thank God. What is happening? The whole system is frozen. The markets are about to open, and we can't execute a single trade. Payroll for 10,000 employees has failed. Our accounts are locked down to read only. The board is in an uproar. I can't get in. It's asking for a third-party authorization key that none of us have ever heard of. Our credit lines are frozen. Corbin. It's a catastrophe. Corbin sank onto the edge of the uncomfortable white couch where his wife was still sleeping. His world was crumbling in real time. His empire was paralyzed. His personal wealth was gone. He was, for all intents and purposes, broke and powerless. And then he heard a soft stirring. Genevieve pushed herself up slowly, groaning as she straightened her back. She blinked, looking at him with weird, innocent eyes. Corbin. What's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost. He stared at her calm face, at the gentle way her hand rested on her belly. A sudden, impossible, horrifying thought began to bloom in the darkness of his mind. The timing, the precision, the utter devastation. This wasn't a random hacker in Russia or China. A random hacker would have just stolen the money. This was different. This was surgical. This was personal. This was an act of strangulation. He looked at her, truly looked at her for the first time in months. He saw the intelligence in her eyes, an intelligence he had always found charming, but never threatening. He remembered her telling him long ago about some boring job she used to have, something with numbers, before she embraced her true passion for art. He had barely listened. Genevieve, he said, his voice a hoarse whisper. What did you do? She met his gaze, and for the first time he saw no fear, no tears, no weakness. He saw only a cold, shimmering strength he had never known she possessed. She gave him a small, placid smile. I believe she said softly, her voice as clear and cool as the morning air, the term you used was my domain. I decided to expand it. The silence that followed Genevieve's admission was heavier than any sound. Corbin stared at her, his mind a maelstrom of denial and dawning horror. It was impossible. Genevieve. His quiet, artistic wife who cried during sad movies and spent her afternoons at the Met. The idea that she possessed the skill, let alone the audacity to dismantle his financial empire in a single night, was preposterous. And yet the calm certainty in her eyes told him it was true. He finally choked out a laugh escaping his lips that held no humor, only hysteria. "You did this? How with your paintbrushes and art books? Don't be deliberately obtuse, Corbin," she said, her voice still infuriatingly level. She slowly, painfully pushed herself to her feet. "You were never interested in my life before you were you. You just saw what you wanted to see, a pretty pliable accessory. You never thought to ask what a woman with a degree in forensic economics from an Ivy League school did before she decided to teach. You bought the packaging, you never checked the contents. Forensic economics." The words hit him like a physical blow. He felt the blood drain from his face. All those nights she'd claimed to be reading, was she studying him? His panic began to sharpen into a focused rage. "Unyu." He commanded, his voice low and guttural. "Whatever you did, undo it, right now. This isn't a game, Genevieve. You have paralyzed my company. People's livelihoods are at stake." "My livelihood. Our livelihood. You mean?" She corrected gently. "And the livelihood of our son. Was that on your mind last night when you sent me to sleep on this thing?" She gestured to the couch with contempt. "This wasn't a game for me either, Corbin. This was a lesson in valuation. You needed to understand my worth, and the worth of the child I am carrying." Before he could retort, his phone buzzed violently on the couch beside him. It was a name he hadn't expected to see: Piers Morganfield, a notoriously aggressive investigative journalist for the Financial Chronicle. Corbin never spoke to the press directly if he could avoid it. He let his PR team handle the vultures. He ignored the call. It immediately buzzed again, and again. "You should probably answer that," Genevieve said, walking towards the kitchen. She opened the refrigerator, which, unlike the other appliances, still had power, and took out a bottle of water. "It seems your problems are just beginning." With a sense of dread, Corbin answered the call, putting it on speakerphone. "Sure." Corbin Piers Morganfield. The journalist's oily voice filled to the room. "Big day, for sure. Consolidated, it seems. My sources are telling me your trading floors are silent, and your international credit lines have been frozen. Any comment on the rumors of a catastrophic liquidity crisis?" "My company does not comment on rumor or speculation," Corbin said through gritted teeth. "Of course not." Piers chuckled. "But it's more than a rumor when your own senior partners are leaking like a sieve. Is it true that you've been locked out of your own accounts? Some are saying it's a hostile cyber attack. Others are whispering about a regulatory seizure. But I have a more interesting theory. I have a source who says you've been cooking the books for years and someone finally pulled the pin. Anything to say about a little side hustle called Project Nightingale?" Corbin froze his blood, turning to ice. Project Nightingale. It was one of the folders Genevieve had downloaded. He shot a look at her. She was leaning against the counter, sipping her water, watching him. Her expression was unreadable. "I have no idea what you're talking about," Corbin managed, but his voice lacked conviction. "Oh, I think you do." Piers pressed, sensing weakness. A series of shell corporations registered in the Caymans used to inflate the value of undeveloped land assets ahead of rezoning petitions. A classic pump-and-dump shore, only with real estate. It's brilliant, I'll give you that, but highly illegal. My source gave me an account number, a transfer record. It seems a large payment was made from Nightingale funds to a certain city planning official just last week. This goes way beyond a liquidity problem. This is a scandal that could send you to prison. Corbin hung up the phone, his hand shaking uncontrollably. He turned to Genevieve, his eyes wild with accusation and a new, terrifying fear. "What did you do?" he whispered. "Did you talk to him? Did you leak those files?" Genevieve set her water bottle down. Her calm demeanor finally broke, but not with fear. With disgust. "You think I would call Piers Morganfield? Please. I may not respect you anymore, Corbin, but I'm not suicidal. I downloaded some of your files last night because my instincts told me to. I haven't even had a chance to look at them yet. It seems I didn't need to. Your entire empire is a house of cards, isn't it? Built on lies and corruption." She walked over to the windows, looking down at the city he professed to own. "All this time you've been acting like a king, but you're just a common criminal in a more expensive suit. This isn't about your hurt feelings anymore, is it? This is about you going to jail." The revelation hit him with the force of a physical impact. Genevieve hadn't just put him in a financial prison. She had inadvertently stumbled upon the secret that could put him in a real one. The freeze wasn't just an inconvenience. It was a ticking time bomb. The locked accounts, the failed transactions, they would trigger audits, federal investigations. His carefully constructed world of smoke and mirrors was about to be exposed to the harsh light of day, all because he couldn't stand the sound of his pregnant wife getting up to pee at night. "Genevieve," he said, his tone completely changed. The anger was gone, replaced by a raw, desperate plea. "You have to help me. We have to fix this. Before they start digging, you can put the money back. You can unlock the accounts. We can say it was a technical error." She turned to face him, a humorless smile on her face. It's we. There was no we last night when I was crying in your study. There was no we when you exiled me from our bed. You made it very clear that your world was yours and I was just living in it." She walked back towards him, her steps measured and deliberate. She picked up the USB drive from the coffee table where she'd left it. It was so small, so insignificant, yet it held his entire life in its memory. Project Nightingale. She mused, reading the label she'd affixed. What a poetic name for such an ugly little secret. "You told me you were building a legacy for our son. Was this it? A legacy of fraud, a father in a prison jumpsuit." Corbin couldn't speak. He was trapped. If he fought her, she could release the files. If he begged, he was at her mercy. He had held all the power in their relationship, and now he had none. He was utterly, completely at her mercy. "What do you want, Genevieve?" He finally asked, the words tasting like ash in his mouth. "What's your price?" She looked at the USB drive in her hand, and then at him. Her gaze was as sharp and cutting as a diamond. "My price," she repeated softly. "Oh, Corbin, you couldn't possibly afford it. But we're going to have a long, long conversation about the terms of my new partnership in this family. A very long conversation. Get comfortable. It doesn't look like you're going to the office today." The penthouse, once a symbol of Corbyn's untouchable power, transformed into a negotiation room. The glittering city view was no longer a backdrop for triumph, but a silent witness to a seismic shift in power. The air, still chilled to a precise 68 degrees, now felt thick with tension and unspoken threats. Corbyn, the titan of industry, sat slumped in one of his designer armchairs, looking smaller than Genevieve had ever seen him. The bespoke suit now seemed like a hollow costume. Genevieve did not sit. She stood a commanding presence despite her burgeoning belly, with the small USB drive held loosely in her hand. It was her scepter. She had spent the last hour in the master bedroom. Their bedroom using her own laptop to finally review the contents of the files she had downloaded. What she found was worse than she could have imagined. Project Nightingale wasn't just a single instance of bribery. It was a sophisticated multi-year scheme involving at least 3 other city officials and the fraudulent inflation of half a dozen properties. It was a conspiracy. Corbyn hadn't just built an empire. He had systematically cheated his way to the top, putting countless investors and the city itself at risk. The sheer scale of the illegality was breathtaking. He wasn't just facing a few years in a white-collar prison. He was facing decades. She walked back into the living room, her expression grim. Corbyn looked up his face, a mask of desperation. The accounts he began using, a pet name he hadn't used in a year. It sounded alien and sickening on his lips. The board is calling emergency meetings. The press it's a feeding frenzy. We have to reverse this. There is no we, Genevieve said, her voice cutting through his plea. There is you, a man who is about to be indicted on multiple counts of fraud, conspiracy, and bribery. And there is me, the mother of your son, who is about to decide if I will be a witness for the prosecution or the architect of your salvation. Corbyn flinched, as if she had struck him. You wouldn't. Wouldn't I? She countered, taking a step closer. Last night you looked at me with nothing but contempt. You declared me a distraction, an emotional burden. You banished me from my own bed because my pregnancy inconvenienced you. You treated me with a cruelty I wouldn't wish on a stranger. So you will have to forgive me if my maternal protective instincts are currently focused on my child, not on the criminal who happens to be his father. She let the words hang in the air, watching him absorb the full weight of his predicament. He had pushed her away, and in doing so had given her the very leverage she now held over his head. What do you want? He repeated, his voice barely a whisper. Everything you want, the company, the penthouse. It's all yours. Just don't release those files. Genevieve laughed, a short, bitter sound. You still don't get it, do you? You think this is about money. I walked away from a 6-figure career for a $30,000 a year teaching job because I wanted a life with meaning, not a life with a bigger balance sheet. I don't want your crooked company, Corbyn. I don't want this sterile mausoleum you call a home. I want a safe and secure future for my son. A future that is completely insulated from you and the chaos you've created. She paused, her gaze unwavering. So here are my terms. This is not a negotiation. You will listen and you will agree. If you so much as hesitate, I will walk out of this apartment, get in a taxi which I will pay for with the emergency cash I keep, because unlike you, I plan for contingencies, and I will go directly to the U.S. Attorney's office. Do you understand me? He nodded numbly, his eyes fixed on the USB drive. Term number 1. She began ticking a finger in the air. You will immediately sign over 51% of your personal legitimate assets into an irrevocable trust for our son. I will be the sole trustee. This will not be Shaw consolidated stock, which will be worthless by noon. This will be the chalet in Gstaad, the art collection, the real one. Not the fakes you have on loan and the portfolio of blue-chip stocks you had before you started your little criminal enterprise. My lawyers, not yours, will draft the documents. You will sign them today. Corbyn's jaw dropped. That was the core of his real wealth, the foundation. Term number two, she continued, ignoring his shock. This apartment will be sold. I will not raise my son in this place. The proceeds will be placed into a separate trust for me. It will serve as my compensation for the career I abandoned, the emotional distress you have caused, and as a thank you for not sending you to prison for the rest of your life. Genevieve, be reasonable, he started. Am I being unreasonable? She shot back. Or were you being unreasonable when you told your heavily pregnant wife to sleep on the couch? I'm simply rebalancing the scales. Term number 3. She went on, her voice like ice. You will seek help, immediately. Not a business coach or a PR guru, a real therapist, a psychiatrist, someone who can diagnose and treat whatever malignant narcissistic personality disorder has allowed you to believe that your behavior is acceptable. You will attend sessions weekly for a minimum of 1 year. I will require proof of attendance. You will not fix your soul, Corbyn, but you may learn to fake being a decent human being for the sake of your son. She took a breath, the hardest part yet to come. And term number 4. We are separating. As soon as the trusts are established and the apartment is on the market, I am leaving. I will find my own place, a real home where our son can grow up surrounded by warmth and honesty, not chrome and deceit. You will have visitation rights, but they will be supervised, until I and a court-appointed psychologist are satisfied that you are not a damaging influence on him. The finality of her words crushed the remaining air from the room. This wasn't just a financial takeover. It was the complete deconstruction of his life. She was taking his son, his money, his home, and his freedom. And in exchange, she was offering him one thing, the absence of a prison cell. And what about the company? He asked, his voice hollow. And Project Nightingale. Even with the accounts unfrozen, the leak to the press. I'm ruined. This was the master stroke. Genevieve had thought about this all morning. That, she said, is your problem to solve. However, I am a benevolent architect. Once you have signed every document my lawyers put in front of you, I will do 2 things. First, I will release the holds on your business accounts. I will relinquish the third-party authorization. You can have your company back, or what's left of it. You will have liquidity to fight the fires. Second, she said, holding up the USB drive, I will give you this. It is the only copy of the Nightingale files. The data on your laptop has been securely wiped. What you do with this information is up to you. You can try to bury it and pray no one else ever finds it. Or you can do the one thing that might save you. He looked at her, confused. What's that? You can get ahead of it, she said, her old forensic accounting mind kicking in. You can go to the board, claim you've just uncovered a rogue operation run by a subordinate. Your CFO, Gerald, perhaps since his name is on some of the transfers. You can be the hero who self-reports. You can fire him, launch an internal investigation, cooperate with the SEC. You'll take a massive hit. The company will be fined into oblivion. But you, Corbyn Shaw, the CEO, might just emerge as the man who cleaned house. A ruthless bastard, yes, but one who did the right thing in the end. It's your only move. He stared at her, a strange mix of horror and awe on his face. She had not just defeated him. She had given him a new script, a new path forward. It was a humiliating, devastating path, but it was a path that didn't end in a federal penitentiary. She had thought of everything. She had him completely and utterly cornered. The king was in chains and his queen was dictating the terms of his surrender. So she said, placing the USB drive on the table between them, a final tantalizing offer. "Do we have an agreement, Corbin Shaw?" The man who had never bent to anyone looked at the woman he had so grievously underestimated, the mother of his child. He looked at the evidence of his crimes, and for the first time in his life, he surrendered. Yes, he said the word, a quiet admission of his total and complete defeat. "We have an agreement." The days that followed were a whirlwind of calculated chaos, all orchestrated by Genevieve from a suite at the Carlisle Hotel which she'd booked using her emergency credit card. She refused to spend another night in the penthouse. It was tainted. Her first call was not to a divorce lawyer, but to Annette Vogel, the sharpest, most ruthless trust and estates attorney in New York City, a woman known for dismantling the fortunes of arrogant men. Annette, intrigued by the sheer audacity of Genevieve's story, took the case with relish. Within 48 hours, she had drafted a series of ironclad documents that were, as she put it, legal poetry. Corbin, looking pale and gaunt, signed every page in Annette's sterile conference room. He transferred ownership of the Gstad chalet, the verified Klee and Rothko, from his private collection, and a significant portion of his stock portfolio into the Bartholomew Shaw Trust. He signed the listing agreement for the penthouse with a top broker and wired the initial deposit for Genevieve's new trust account from the sale of his prized vintage Ferrari. He presented a letter from a board-certified psychiatrist confirming his first appointment. He did it all without argument, a hollowed-out man going through the motions of his own dismantling. True to her word, the moment the final signature was dry, Genevieve sat with her own laptop and with a few quiet keystrokes relinquished her control over Shaw Consolidated. She sent the anonymous authorization key to the company's general counsel, and the accounts were unlocked. Liquidity flowed back into the corporate veins just in time to stave off complete collapse. Then, as Corbin watched, she slid the small USB drive across the polished mahogany table. "Your story to tell," she said simply. Corbin took it, his hand trembling slightly. He followed her script to perfection. He called an emergency board meeting, presenting himself as a shocked and betrayed leader. He claimed to have been alerted to financial irregularities by an internal system flag, Genevieve's lockdown, which prompted him to uncover a deeply embedded rogue operation, masterminded by his longtime CFO Gerald. Gerald, who had been a loyal if spineless follower, was the perfect scapegoat. He was fired spectacularly and publicly. Corbin announced he was self-reporting the issue to the SEC and launching a full, transparent internal investigation. The press, which had been ready to crucify him, now had a new narrative. Corbin Shaw, the ruthless CEO, was cleaning house. His stock plummeted, but it didn't go to zero. He was no longer a titan, but he was a survivor. It was a brutal, ugly, and brilliant move, and it had been designed by the wife he had thrown away. While Corbin fought for his corporate life, Genevieve built a new one. She found a beautiful, light-filled brownstone in Brooklyn on a quiet, tree-lined street. It had a small garden in the back and a room with a large bay window that she decided would be the nursery. The sterile chill of the penthouse was replaced by the smell of fresh paint and old wood. She reconnected with her old friends, the ones she had drifted from, under the weight of Corbin's shadow. They rallied around her, bringing food, helping her unpack and filling her new home with laughter. She didn't tell them the full story. She simply said that she and Corbin had different values and that she wanted to raise her son in a different environment. They didn't need to know the details of Project Nightingale or the cold fury that had been forged on that white leather couch. They just needed to see that the vibrant, passionate Genevieve they had known was back. 2 months later, Genevieve gave birth to a healthy baby boy. In the delivery room, holding him for the first time, she looked at his tiny, perfect face and felt a wave of love, so fierce it eclipsed everything else. She did not name him Bartholomew. She named him Owen, a name that meant noble and well-born, a name she chose herself. Corbin came to the hospital. He stood awkwardly by the door, a ridiculously expensive teddy bear in his hands. He looked older, tired. He had lost a staggering amount of weight, and his company was a fraction of its former self, constantly under the microscope of federal regulators. But he was not in prison. He looked at the baby in her arms. "He's small," he said the first words that came to his mind. "All the best things start that way," Genevieve replied, her voice soft. He asked if he could hold him. She hesitated for a moment, then nodded. She watched him as he held his son, his touch clumsy and uncertain. She saw a flicker of something in his eyes, not the old arrogance, but something more akin to wonder, or perhaps regret. It wasn't forgiveness, and it wasn't a reunion. But it was, she thought, a beginning. He was sticking to his therapy. He was making an effort. The future was unwritten, but for the first time it felt like it could be a story worth reading. Genevieve had not just frozen his accounts. She had frozen a destructive path. In the wreckage of Corbin's corrupt empire, she had salvaged a future for her son, built on a foundation of her own strength and intelligence. She was no longer the Titan's wife. She was Genevieve Parker, the architect of her own life, a mother who had moved mountains not with rage, but with resolve. And in the quiet peace of her new home, far from the cold, empty heights of the penthouse, she knew she was finally, truly rich. That single cruel command, "sleep on the couch," was the catalyst that brought a corrupt empire to its knees. It wasn't just about a fight between a husband and wife. It was about a woman reclaiming her power, her identity, and her future. Genevieve reminded us that strength isn't always loud. Sometimes it's the quiet, meticulous work done in the dead of night while the world sleeps. She fought not for revenge, but for the life of her unborn child, proving that a mother's love is the most powerful force on earth. What did you think of Genevieve's actions? Was she justified? What would you have done? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. We love hearing your perspectives on these real-life dramas. If this story moved you, please give this video a thumbs up. Share it with someone who appreciates a story of strength and resilience. And don't forget to subscribe for more tales of justice and unexpected twists.